The day Michael Foster came to my home to end our engagement, he arrived like a storm. His presence filled the Miller estate with tension, his posture proud, his tone merciless. At his side was Emily White, a girl in a wheelchair whose pale face and trembling hands made her appear almost ethereal. Michael's gaze cut through me like steel as he announced that the promise between our families meant nothing, that the woman beside him was the one he would spend his life with. Emily lowered her lashes, her voice trembling but laced with triumph, insisting she never meant to take my place, but Michael deserved someone who had given everything for him. I smiled though my chest burned. How noble of you, Emily. How fortunate of you, Michael. May the two of you find joy in the life you've chosen to build together. Michael's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his face. He had expected tears, pleas, maybe even hysteria. My calm unsettled him. Emily had once been nothing more than a clerk in the Foster group. She was unremarkable, barely noticed, until that night 3 years ago. The story everyone believed was simple. She had gone to the Foster estate to deliver documents when the fire broke out. They said she dragged Michael from the blaze and lost the use of her legs in the process. That story transformed her overnight from nobody into a saint, from a shadow into an angel. But I remembered the truth because this was not my first time living it. In my first life I had loved Michael with a blind devotion that consumed me. I had dragged him out of that fire with my own hands, only to fall into a coma for 3 long years. While I lay broken and unconscious, he never once came to see me. Instead, he visited Emily, worshipping her as his savior. The world adored her story. I was ridiculed, mocked as pathetic and unloved. When I finally gathered evidence proving I had been the one who saved him, I placed it before him. He never even looked. Emily wept, claimed shame, and ended her own life. The city turned on me, blaming me for her death. Michael's hatred became merciless. He crushed the Miller Group, shattering the company my father had built from steel and sweat. My parents died of despair. My brother David tried to fight back, but his brakes failed one night on a lonely road. They called it an accident. I knew better. His sweetheart followed him into death. Me. I was left with nothing but humiliation until despair carried me into the grave. That was my first life. That was the grave I carried into the second chance. The Fosters and Millers were no ordinary families. The Fosters ruled the city's financial and shipping empires, their name gilded in every stock exchange and social hall. The Millers, forged from manufacturing and technology, commanded industry and innovation. Together, their union had been a marriage of dynasties, one that the public devoured like a modern fairy tale. When I was engaged to Michael, the press called it destiny. When he cast me aside, it became blood sport. That was why every word, every rumor, every headline mattered. We were not just people, we were symbols. The city thrived on our triumphs and feasted on our scandals. So when Michael stood in my home again, spitting contempt, and Emily sat beside him like a fragile goddess, I did not weep. I smiled. My silence was not weakness. It was the sharpest blade I owned. And I already knew the truth of her wheelchair. In my first life, I had lived long enough to see her stand, her miraculous recovery staged for the world. She was not broken. She never had been. David could not comprehend how I bore such humiliation without a word. His fists slammed the table, his voice thick with rage as he swore he would drag Michael back and make him pay for every insult. I touched his arm and told him not to waste his breath on a man blinded by lies. Let Michael think I'm defeated, let him believe I'm finished. Silence would cut deeper than rage. David stared at me as though he no longer recognized his sister, but I had already decided. I would never again be the fool I once was. When Michael publicly announced the end of our engagement, the city erupted. Headlines praised his freedom, mocked me as unwanted. Socialites whispered over champagne, sneering that I had wasted his youth by sleeping away 3 years. My parents tried to shield me from the cruelty, offering comfort, urging me to travel, but I saw the truth. Michael had never stayed out of love. Only my family's refusal had held him back. His loyalty was nothing but convenience. I stepped into the Miller Group with purpose, remembering every failure of my past life. I moved swiftly, cutting away weak projects before they could sink us. This time we would not fall. I knew which contracts would sour, which investments were poisoned, which rivals would one day bear their fangs. I shifted our focus before the rot could set in. Where the Fosters once outpaced us, I placed myself directly in their path, cutting deals they thought were theirs, pulling allies to my side with knowledge I should never have had. Every step I took was not only to save the Millers, but to strip the Fosters of the power they once used to crush me. I also set quiet fires of my own. Behind closed doors, I hired investigators, placing before them every detail I remembered from that night. The angle of the smoke, the alarms that never sounded, the way Emily had collapsed into Michael's arms at the perfect moment. I guided them where to look, which witnesses to revisit, which questions to ask. The discoveries would not be immediate, but they would be inevitable. The truth was already burning its way out of the ashes. All it needed was air. I next saw Michael at a glittering banquet. He had not been invited, but he entered boldly, Emily wheeled beside him like a crown jewel. His eyes never sought me, but his presence pressed against my skin like a curse. Emily, however, came unerringly to me, her smile sharp. "I wondered how long it would take for you to look at me," she murmured, her voice honeyed with cruelty. "It must wound you seeing him at my side." I studied her as though she were porcelain. "Wow me. Oh, I'm only astonished at how easily he mistakes lies for truth." Her smile faltered. "You still want him. But he's mine now." I leaned close. "Do your legs ache, Emily? Or do they stand firm when no one is watching?" Her hands clenched her chair, her face turned pale. "You're cruel," she whispered. Then Michael appeared, wrapping his arm around her, glaring at me as if I were poison. "Stay away from her, Sarah. If you cannot be gracious, stay silent." The crowd sighed, whispering of romance and loyalty. To them he was a prince shielding his wounded princess. To me it was a farce. I lifted my glass, left the room, and felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning the internet overflowed with photographs of them. Michael's protective gaze, Emily's fragile smile. They were painted as a fairy tale. My blurred figure in the background became fodder for ridicule. I answered with a single message, saying I accepted the end of our engagement, regretted the 3 years wasted, and like everyone else, looked forward to their wedding. The tide turned instantly. Strangers called me magnanimous, elegant, and sweet. Emily felt it keenly. The same crowds that had once applauded her now quietened down. Her fragile act no longer shone. Her crown slipped each day she stood beside him. And Michael's affection, once endearing, was laced with strain. The city whispered, and the whispers grew sharp enough to cut. It was then that she came to me. Tears stained her face as she wheeled into my office uninvited, her voice trembling with panic. She begged that I let Michael go, swore that without him she was nothing, confessed that her wheelchair chained her to him as her only anchor. To outsiders her performance might have stirred pity. But I remembered. I had seen her stand. I let her cry, then spoke gently, almost kindly. I told her that Michael's greatest obstacle was not me but his family. If he were no longer heir, no one would oppose their love. She clung to my words like salvation, her eyes lighting with desperate hope. And soon after, Foster secrets began leaking. Projects collapsed. Rivals struck with uncanny precision. The Foster patriarch's fury ended with Michael stripped of his position. And then came the thunder. The fire 3 years ago had not been an accident. At first it had been dismissed as a tragedy. Emily's tale of sacrifice fit too perfectly. Michael silenced doubts with his rage. The patriarch hushed whispers to protect the family's name. But rot cannot stay hidden forever. With the empire faltering, rivals demanded answers. The investigation reopened and the truth came to light. Accelerants soaked into beams. Alarm systems tampered with. Testimonies unraveled. The saintly mask was ripped away. The revelations spread like wildfire. Outrage consumed the city. Anchors on television spoke her name with venom. Social media drowned in fury. Voices rose in chaos. Some screaming that Emily had set the blaze herself to play the heroine, others mocking Michael for destroying himself for a fraud, and others lamenting how they had once ridiculed me while I lay in a coma for saving his life. A man muttered into a reporter's microphone, "We cheered for her while Sarah nearly died. We were fools." The tide that once worshipped her turned and tore her apart. Michael's name became a warning, hers a curse. Mine was whispered now with awe, with guilt, with reluctant admiration. The final collapse came not behind closed doors, but in the grand lobby of the Foster Group building itself. Michael stormed through the gleaming marble hall, his footsteps echoing like gunfire. Emily wheeled frantically after him, her voice breaking. Michael, please. Listen to me. The lobby was crowded. Employees returning from lunch, partners waiting for meetings, clients escorted by reception. Even staff from the cafe in the corner stood frozen with trays in their hands. All eyes followed the spectacle as the once heir strode past, his so-called angel chasing him. Don't walk away from me. Emily cried. She pushed the wheels with trembling hands, but Michael turned suddenly, his voice a roar. Enough. The sound cracked through the lobby. Phones rose instinctively, screens glowing as people began to record. Michael's voice shook with fury. Tell them, Emily. Tell them here and now that you set the fire. Tell them you lied about saving me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A receptionist covered her mouth. Someone dropped a clipboard. Emily's face blanched as she stammered. I did it for you, for us. I had nothing, Michael. Nothing. If you believed I saved you, you'd never leave me. Michael's laugh was jagged, bitter. And so you burned everything down? You chained me to guilt and lies? For 3 years I spat on Sarah, called her a liar, humiliated her while you basked in praise you never earned. His voice cracked, but he pressed on louder. It was her. Sarah Miller pulled me from the flames. Sarah nearly died for me. And I destroyed our relationship with my own hands because of you. The lobby erupted with whispers. And then Emily moved. Her hands trembled as she let go of the wheels and took a few steps toward Michael, reaching her hand out to him. Phones tilted, recording every second. You can walk, Michael whispered, horror cutting through his fury. He staggered back as if the sight had struck him. God help me, you could walk all along. The silence shattered as voices burst out around them. Employees shouted in disbelief. One partner muttered, We backed this company for her? For a fraud. A junior employee cursed under his breath, his phone still filming. Michael's voice broke, raw and hollow. You gave me nothing, Emily. Nothing but lies. The lobby buzzed with outrage, every phone capturing Michael's and Emily's ruin. By evening the footage was everywhere. Clips of Emily walking spread like wildfire, hashtags crowning her a liar, Michael a fool, Sarah the wronged savior. On the streets and online voices clashed like fire. 3 years of pity and she could walk all along, one comment fumed. Another sneered, Michael Foster rejected Sarah Miller for this fraud. He deserves every bit of this. Others were quieter, guilty. We mocked Sarah while she lay in a coma. She saved him and we called her shameless. We were wrong. Even Foster employees whispered among themselves. Our clients were right there in the lobby, one muttered. Half of them left without saying a word. The contracts are gone. Another cursed, I can't believe I spent years calling Emily an angel. She's a devil in disguise. The gossip fed itself until no cafe, no bar, no boardroom in the city could avoid the topic. The fall of Michael Foster and Emily White became the scandal of the decade. And while the city boiled, the Miller household was quiet. My father sat with the newspaper folded on the table, his lips pressing into the faintest smile. My mother, who had carried worry in her eyes for too many years, finally leaned back in her chair, relief softening her face. David's laughter rang through the halls again, sharp and unrestrained, as though the weight crushing his chest had finally been torn away. As for me, I scrolled through the storm of comments, the endless praise, the apologies, the fury, and I smiled faintly. I did not need to post a word. The truth had spoken louder than anything I could have written. The world finally saw Emily for what she was and Michael for what he had thrown away. The empire that once crushed me crumbled into dust, and I walked among its ruins without regret. I had been the savior all along, the girl who dragged him from the fire, who slept 3 years in the dark while he spat on my name. And now I was the woman who rose from the ashes while he drowned in them. For the first time I breathed without chains. My silence had been my blade, my patience my weapon, and my truth my crown. Michael Foster was ruined. Emily White was exposed. And I was free. It was exactly as it should be.